All right, hello and welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham. Certainly for your first week here and throughout the month, kind of give an overview of the different weeks and the assignments and just kind of the class as a whole with the expectations that you have through the month, the expectations from the class, the expectations you might have, and kind of get into some introductory material overall. We will start out with a discussion of the class and then get into the actual assignments in the second half. We'll go through certainly talking about your first composition, your first game project that you will be working on this week, and give examples and have some things to listen to and take care of all of that. So overall, there we go. Our main focus here is to introduce you to this side of the entertainment industry, talk about the role of a music composer working on a game project. We'll certainly discuss what is the same about the creation of music for games and what is unique and different. We will talk about the fact that most of the actual creation of the music is very much the same as any other format that you've worked on. It is still music theory, it is still music composition, instrumentation, or arrangement, understanding the production process and the understanding all of the tools and your DAW and your synths and all of your effects and mixing and everything that you know and love about audio and music, especially, but applied specifically to games. So certainly the creation of the music is very much the same, but what we do with the music, once you have bounced out all of the WAV files, once you have set up and created the music in some sort of form, then we apply that to the game, and we'll talk about how your music actually works in the game and how do you start from a blank slate or a blank session and build your tracks up in a way that makes sense to work in the game later on. So we'll talk about some of the unique aspects of music for games. Certainly the fact that your music does not exist in one long linear piece of music that plays from beginning of the game to the end. We will talk about linear music versus non-linear music. Most of the music that you've ever probably listened to or worked with is a linear piece of music. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and every single time you rewind back and play through it again, it will play back the exact same way. And linear music is very much the way that most music exists in the world. We build our music with a lot of structure and form. We have tempo and time signature and bars and beats, and we have a structure like verses and choruses and intros and outros, and there's a very deliberate progression to our music. But when you are playing a game, the music and the music soundtrack has to react to all of the actions and changes that are going on in the game. So let's talk about, let's say when you're watching a movie. You sit down to watch a 2-hour-long movie. You're either in a movie theater or you are at home sitting on your couch, and while watching that movie, there is a 2-hour-long audio file that plays from beginning to end that represents all of the music, the sound effects, and dialogue. It's either stereo or 5.1 surround sound, and it plays back directly along with the movie, and that you experience the exact same thing. Whoever is watching that movie, whether they're watching it on a huge theater system or a small TV, they get the same experience. Every time you rewind back, it's going to be the same thing. However, when you play a game, everybody's experience while playing that game should probably be different. It's either going to be a little bit different. Maybe you're playing a puzzle game, and when you reach the high score, or when you solve the puzzle, or whatever, the music, it's going to be different for everybody who plays that puzzle game. Or in a lot of more big, open, modern games where you feel like you're the hero of the story and there's this massive world that you can explore, everybody who goes through that game will progress through it in a different way and have a different experience. And it's either going to be a little bit different or it's going to be wildly different. And your music needs to react to all of that. It basically needs to ride the ups and downs of the action in the story, the turns in the objectives and the storytelling and the characters and the level, the world that it exists in. And so your music doesn't exist in one long audio file that plays from beginning to end. It is made up of little chunks, little pieces and parts of a much larger soundtrack that are put together and rearranged in multiple different ways to create the seamless soundtrack that you hear while playing a game. So it is, we talk about how do you divide up your music, how do you divide up your soundtrack in a way that it makes sense when you put it all back together. It ends up being a bit of puzzle pieces that can rearrange according to whatever you need to do with your music. So we'll talk about the linear, or actually the non-linear nature of music for games. We will talk about the interactive nature of the game and ultimately your music also. The fact that you don't ultimately know what is going to happen in the game. You know what's possible. You're part of the game team, the development team that makes the game. It's certainly not infinite. There is only a certain amount of things that could happen in that game. But you certainly don't know the order that's going to happen or how quickly or slowly anybody's going to progress through the game. Some people are going to just fly through the game as fast as possible, just defeating everything in their path and just rocking their way all the way through. And they might be flying past parts of the content or the soundtrack because they never lose and they never slow down. They are going through at a very, very fast pace. And so your music needs to react to that. There are others that are going to be knocking into walls for a long period of time. Either they're trying to find the next part of the level or the next enemy to fight or the next part of the story or whatever it is. And they're trying to find that secret door or solve the puzzle or whatever it is to progress on. And they're stuck in that same place for the past 10 minutes and they're frustrated already that they can't figure out whatever they need to do to progress in the game. And then there's your music in the background looping over and over and over again, making them even more frustrated because they hear that same piece of music playing. So your music has to react to all of these different people playing your game. Once you give a controller to another human, then all bets are off. You have no idea as to what they're going to do. And a lot of people have a whole lot of fun going in and trying to do all sorts of ridiculous stuff in the game. And your music has to be able to accomplish accomplish all of that. So we will talk about how we will talk about the creative and also technical aspects of music for a game. Certainly a lot of it and most of it is the creative side. It is telling a story. It is matching an emotion. Basically, your music is there to tell the player how they might feel about what's going on in the game. We'll talk about how do you determine what music you might need or how much music you might need. Where does all of the music go in the game, and how do you make it fit in all the different pieces and parts? We'll talk about how do you start from a blank DAW session and build up your tracks in a way that makes sense for that particular character or that world or that level or that particular action that's going on. And then there's also a creative aspect to the process of once the music is created, then how is it actually going to make its way into the game? So we'll talk about the tools, popular tools, software, different kind of processes and workflows that people use to actually get music and sounds happening in the game. So that's what we're focused on, is to introduce you to the world of a music composer working on a game project. We have a couple of different games for you to work on. Different types of games requires different types of music, and so we'll certainly be discussing all of those aspects. Let's talk about the actual class and the form of it. So we have our Wednesday and Friday classes meeting here at 3:30 Eastern Time, and if you can't make the live classes, then everything is released as an archive the following day. I'll try to get the Friday one out by Friday evening overall, so we can get on that quicker. And then our first session of the week on Wednesdays. This Wednesday session is a little bit different overall than the rest of them, because by week 2 you will have completed your first round of assignments. So we start out on our Wednesday sessions with a bit of peer review. Each week you can submit the work that you've done to a peer review assignment, an optional peer review assignment, and then I will load up everything that has been submitted and gives us an opportunity to talk about a wide variety of things. If you can make it to the live class, then we can chat about it and discuss it back and forth, ask any questions, and I can clarify things, because do I even have Logic open right now? Hold on just a sec. So I just basically open up a Logic session, dump everybody's WAV files in there, all of their music, and just listen to it. And we can talk about it and kind of point our way through everything and ask any questions that needs to discuss, and I can clarify things. And so peer review is highly encouraged each week. Make sure you submit your work so that we can discuss it. The Friday sessions are an open session. Come prepared with questions about the assignments. If you want to listen to anything before the due date, you can send me a Dropbox link and we can load it up and play it. There's an archive with a lot of material about the industry and the process of working on games. But I do want to leave it as an open session so we can discuss anything that needs to be. All right, so that is our Wednesday sessions, our Friday sessions. All of your assignments are due Sunday, so then we can talk about it the following Wednesday. Yeah, that's pretty much what we need to discuss for the class. Again, my name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director of the class. I've been with Full Sail for about 15 years now, working in all sorts of different departments. Started out in the console classes on campus and working in the studios. That was kind of my history before Full Sail. I worked at a production company doing music and sound effects and dialogue or voiceovers. Did a lot of television commercials, radio commercials, production work like that. And so transitioned into Full Sail, started in the studios. Eventually Full Sail got on the game audio train and created game audio class. So we built that up. That was over in the recording arts degree program before music production even existed. And then this class came online. It took a while. Obviously, it's towards the end of the program, so it took a while to actually happen, but I jumped over here and started up the game music composition side of things. So, excuse me. So whatever you have maybe questions on, anything you want to discuss, please get in contact with me. Certainly issues about the class or anything that we need to address. Let's see. I'm on iChat for most of the day when I am not in class teaching. Email and iChat are probably the best ways of getting in contact with me. You can call my phone extension. However, when I am not doing these online classes, so on Wednesday and Friday I'm doing the online classes, I'm away from my desk phone. On Tuesday and Thursday, I teach on campus. I teach from 9 a.m. Well, this month I'll probably be only there from 9 to 11. So I'll be available after that. I'm available all day Monday. So that is my schedule for this month. Website, beyond Full Sail, I do have a game audio production company called Engine Audio. The other thing I want to point out, if you do call my phone and you get a voicemail, then please email me to follow up because I can always respond there. Some projects that I've worked on over the years. Let's see, I started working on like smaller independent projects, but we do have EA Sports here in Orlando. And so I got involved with them for a couple of years, doing a lot of dialogue work and audio editing, and on Madden and NBA Live and Tiger Woods when it used to exist. Then I've currently working on, or most recently worked on, a game called Depth, which is a multi-player underwater sharks versus diver game. If you're familiar with Steam, it's up on there, and we're working on another kind of version of all of that. So a couple of iOS and Android games, but a couple of projects outside of Full Sail. That's really where I started in the game audio. I worked on a couple of smaller projects, but I got involved with EA Sports and kind of brought it up from there overall. So, so whatever aspects of the industry you want to discuss, whatever aspects of it, certainly if it's games, if it is obviously also music and composition, but if it's technology or if it's gear or techniques or anything like that, get in contact with me and we can discuss whatever we need. All right, let me take a quick pause here. Let me know if you have any questions so far. And we'll get into our next topic here. All right. So, early on here, I do have two quick disclaimers that I do want to throw out. Number one is you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. Your ability to play games, your experience with games, your history with games is certainly not important overall in your success in this class. I do understand that we have a wide variety of folks coming through the class that have different experience with games overall. There are those that eat, breathe, and live games and are up on all the newest and latest games and the game technology and maybe game developers and the game industry. And I can certainly nerd out with you all day long about the industry and about games. But I also understand that there is a portion of folks coming through the class that have zero knowledge or experience with much games at all. Maybe they're playing, since maybe they're playing, throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing Minesweeper or chess or something like that. Haven't played a game in a long time. And that's perfectly fine also, because your experience or your skills at playing a video game is certainly not reflected in your success in the class. What is expected overall is your ability to make music, your ability to take the intentions of a game or a client's project and render it into a music soundtrack. So I take the class from the point of view of I'm a game developer. I've hired you to work to be the music composer, to work on these games, and I will provide you with a lot of information about how the games are set up and what is expected of the music, and then it's up to you to actually create the soundtrack that you feel is appropriate. So, even if you don't play games, that's fine. But during this month, we'll certainly immerse you in the game industry. We'll talk about games and working on games and different game companies and the whole kind of industry and structure, like who hires you and how do you find clients and how do you find people to work with and how does it all work. We give you games to play. There's a whole bunch of free games available online that we'll be talking about, and so if nothing else, you'll certainly be playing games through this month. But definitely want to start out with that. The second disclaimer that I have is you don't have to be able to code or program to be successful as a music composer in games. One of the early questions that I get in this discussion, and one of the common questions that is asked when we have industry folks come through Full Sail, we always do a Q&A at the end, and somebody comes up to the mic and says, I know music, I know audio, I can make sounds, and I want to work in games, but do I need to know how to code, or do I need to know how to program to be a music composer or a sound designer working in games? And that is certainly not a requirement overall. Now, of course, any skills that you have will only make you more valuable in the process, but you are hired for your skills as a music composer. And having skills as a programmer are often a completely separate kind of base of knowledge. It is a lifelong kind of trek in learning all of music and music theory and music production. It is another lifelong journey to learn programming and coding and making it all work. Now, there is certainly a technical aspect to everything that we do, but it certainly doesn't get down to the code level. Okay, so 2 disclaimers. I always wanted to talk about goals of the class. So this is kind of what is our focus, what are we doing here, what is our overall purpose in this class, and first and foremost it is to write music. It's kind of the overall goal of the degree program is to give you lots of different opportunities to write in lots of different ways and fashions and for different media and different types of projects. So, of course, that is our main focus overall. So we give you different game projects to work on. By the end of the month, you will have 2 fully working Mac game applications that will have your own custom music and your own custom sound effects. So everything that happens in the audio of that game will be of your creation. They are yours. They are yours to distribute and to add to a portfolio or a demo reel. We will also be creating a video capture of your work, your music and sounds working in the game, so that you can show that off. Also, certainly as you get later in the degree program, we want to have as many resources as possible to be added to a demo reel so you can show off the work that you've done. So that's number 1. Number 2 here, another goal of the class is to play video games. And this is a very important idea. I have a very necessary, a very important concept in this class called game research. And game research is you should be playing video games. You should be playing video games, number one, and paying attention to their music, their audio, their soundtrack, paying attention to the interactivity. Why did that sound play? How did it sound? What is that sound made of? How did the music work? Why did the music switch and change when you did X, Y, or Z in the game? And this becomes quite important if you are interested in working in the games industry. So let's start with the music industry. If you wanted to work in the music industry, you want to be a songwriter, you want to be a music composer, you want to be an artist, you want to be a producer, engineer, whatever it is, you should be listening to tons of music in lots of different styles. Listening to getting a wide base of knowledge for your of music and the music industry, paying attention to artists, paying attention to producers and record labels, production companies, recording studios, engineers, how did they create it, the songwriters, the songwriting process, the recording process, how did they market and sell it, basically every aspect that is involved in the production and creation and the success of music. What music is successful? Why is it successful? Figuring out every aspect of that, because clients in the music industry speak in terms of previous music projects. They will talk about previous albums, previous artists, or say, hey, did you hear that snare drum sound in this particular music track? Or did you hear that vocal style that they used? Or that songwriting technique where they went from the verse to the chorus or the bridge or whatever it was. And if you have knowledge of those songs or artists or genres or whatever it is, you will have a much clearer language to share with whoever your client is. Same thing goes with the film industry. If you are interested in the film industry, you should be watching tons of movies. You should be paying attention to the production company, the composer, the director, the producer, how they created it. Movies are great because they have tons of behind-the-scenes material that you can also get. What was the production process? What was the songwriting or the composition process? Basically, every aspect of a film and different genres of films, so that you have, again, a shared knowledge base or shared language with your client. It just so happens in the video game industry, you should be playing tons of video games, paying attention to those games, the game developers, the music composers, the game publishers, the technology that they use, the industry as a whole, what's coming up in new and latest technology. Because, again, game developers or your game clients are going to speak in terms of previous games. They will talk about soundtracks that they enjoyed and maybe characters that they related to, or stories or objectives, or and all of this stuff can give you a good starting point for your own composition. So, along with just the fun of playing video games, there is also a purpose to all of that, so that you can keep up with what's going on in the industry. And along with all of that music writing and video game playing will be lots of learning. There is a lot of knowledge to be had in all of this. Like I said, there's the entire creative domain, which involves the design and production of the actual music. And then there's the technical aspects, which is how is it actually going to work and play back correctly in the game. So there is a lot involved in all of these aspects. There is a textbook that you should have received for the class. It is a great resource, A Composer's Guide to Game Music by Winfred Phillips. I enjoy it for the class because it is specifically about game music. It was actually quite hard to find a book that, or at least at that time, that was solely about game music. There's quite a few game audiobooks nowadays, but with only one chapter about the music process. So this one dives into it head on and gives a lot of good supplementary material to the class. There is nothing that is a testable material that you would only find in the book. There's no answer to a question that is only somewhere secretly located in the book that you wouldn't hear otherwise in the class. But it is, yeah, like I said, a great supplementary material to the topics that we discuss. All right, let's get into the games themselves. The first game that you'll work on this month is called 2D Platformer. It is a 2D platform arcade game, and let's see what that means. Good. Okay. You shouldn't hear anything at this point. It's just the video playing, and I'll play examples here in a little bit. 2D Platformer is made by Unity Games. Unity Games is a popular game tool developer. They make the Unity game engine, and there are a lot of very popular games made in the Unity game engine. It's kind of like saying Pro Tools or Logic, where that is the DAW that you use to make your music. The Unity game engine is a tool that people use to make games. So this is a demo game released by the company, much in the same way that you might get a demo session in Logic that you can tear apart and figure out how everything works. So to give people some material to work with and to learn about their tools, they release games like this. And then the graphics people can check out how the graphics work, and the animators can check out how the animations work, and we audio folks can work with the music and sound effects. Let me go get the other copy of this video that I can just set to loop, and it'll go round and around. So, 2D Platformer is a 2D platforming game, meaning that it's 2D, that you can't go into the image. It's a flat plane, and it is a platforming game because your main task, or one of the main things that you do, is running and jumping between different platforms. Let's see, where's that video here? Almost there. So platformer games are very common, are still very popular. They have their history all the way back to Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong and all of those variations. Oh, what happened? Oh. Hold on, open the wrong thing. How about I go to the movie? Let's try this. There we go. Hold on a sec. So, as you can see, 2D platformer is a pretty ridiculous idea. You are a bean with a monocle and a top hat and a bazooka, and you are fending off the alien invasion. For some reason, the aliens have come to London, and you can tell that because this is London Bridge. It has fallen down. There is the Big Ben is over here. It's all broken, and the London Eye is here. It's all busted up. So you are the only hope for being humanity to save, I guess, Earth from all of these cute little red and green invaders. So you are armed with your bazooka to basically take all of them out. And this isn't a full game by any means. This would be like one level of everything. There's no ending to the game. You just either run out of health or the score just keeps going up and up until you choose to stop. Oh, I need to set this to loop. Maybe. Where'd that go? Loop. There we go. So let's talk about the music. The music is, for this first game, I leave it up to you. I leave up the style to you. The instrumentation, the genre. I'm more interested in the process of you writing the music and getting into the game and testing to see how it all works. So the overall style of the music, whether you want it to be electronic or like a classic retro game, or if you want it to be orchestral or hip hop or rock or something like that, any of that could be appropriate overall. There's a couple of requirements, which would be this game is probably all ages, family friendly. You could picture this being like an iOS or an Android game. It's probably like pretty wacky and silly and lighthearted overall. Nothing too serious or dark or depressing. Upbeat, so kind of a faster pace overall to keep the energy going in the game. But your choice of instrumentation and your style, I leave that a little bit more open. Along with the game in this video, you also get a PDF that describes all sorts of different aspects of the assignment. There's a couple things that I want to point out here, and then we'll listen to examples. I won't just talk my way through this entire thing. I'll load up and play some examples for you. Maybe, here we go. So, once my computer figures itself out, come on. It's just a PDF. There you go. So it starts out here with project overview. This is a lot of the same stuff that I'll be talking about at this point, so I'll leave that to you. There is a section here about the musical style and game overview. So it says here, if it doesn't scroll away, stop. 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the game industry. Classics like Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong and Metroid were all 2D platformer games. All right, well, I guess it's going to scroll away. So platformer games have been around for quite a while. Okay, so you can stop scrolling now. Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, Metroid, all of these classic games were all platformer games. And they're still quite frequent as a modern genre. Oh my goodness, it's going to scroll the whole document. Stop, whatever you're doing, stop. Go back up. Okay, phew. Musical style. I have a line here that says Monty Python meets Mars Attacks or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers. There are two elements that you might pull from. It is set in London, so it can have a British influence, whatever that means. So it could have maybe more brass in it, or maybe more of a kind of a London mod vibe to it. But there's also, it's an alien invasion. It's probably kind of a campy sci-fi alien invasion. So maybe a theremin or some sort of element that gives it a little bit of that retro sci-fi feel. How to play. The arrow keys to move left and right. Spacebar will jump. Mouse click will be your will fire your weapon. There are also pickups that are health pickups and bomb pickups. You can drop a bomb and do an area of damage. Instrumentation, again, I leave that part up to you, but there should be enough instrumentation to create a full mix. You need to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. Probably should be more than just 4 instruments. Your drum kit, your bass line, probably a couple of instruments that represent harmony that will then be supporting the lead instrument. Your lead melodic instrument is going to provide most of the voice and the theme of your music, and you want it to constantly be developing so you don't you're not too repetitive and bore the player. Next is this asset list. This is a very handy resource because it lets you know all of the files that you will be creating for this assignment. There are a total of 9 files that you will create. The music soundtrack is broken up into these 9 files. 3 different categories. You have 3 intro files, you have 3 main loop files, and you have 3 ending files, or I call them cues. Intro cues, main loop cues, and ending cues. The intro cues, well, we have 3 different categories, each with 3 different variations. Those variations are going to feel like they come from the same song. It's all the same band playing the same instruments, but playing different variations of a tune or a theme. It's also very important to understand that intro 1 does not always go to main loop 1, which does not always go to ending 1. This is where the idea that your music can interact and randomize and shuffle according to what's happening. Excuse me, it will randomly choose different variations of 1, 2, and 3 and recombine them together. So your intro 3 needs to go to main loop 2 and will end with ending 1. And it can play back in any sort of order. And this is really where the challenge of this composition is, of having 3 variations of 3 ideas that can then combine in all sorts of different ways. The intros are 2 bars long. The main loops are 8 bars long. Those main loops are going to be most of your soundtrack, most of the content of your music. During gameplay, during most of the time while the player is playing, they will be hearing these 3 main loops that will just constantly randomize around. And then 3 endings. As soon as you run out of health points, you die, you lose a life, then it'll randomly play one of these ending cues. So we have these particular files that we'll need to create. Let's take a look at some examples now. Oh, actually, no. Let's go back into the video and let me explain how these play back, how these are going to work. Hold on just a sec. All right. So, when the game starts, where did my mouse go? That's not my mouse. It's the video's mouse. There's my mouse. Stop. All right. When the game starts, your character kind of drops down onto the platform. The computer says, okay, the game has started. What do I do? And the game looks at the code and says, okay, there should be 3 files, 3 wave files called intro 01, 02, and 03, and they should be placed in this exact folder. The game only knows to look for the files that are named exactly like this. And there's a very specific location that all of your files end up in. So it says, okay, game has started. What do I do? There should be 3 intro files, randomly choose one and play it. Okay, so it finds the files, it randomly chooses intro 2 and plays it. Now, depending on how fast your music is, all of your intros are 2 bars long. So 2 bars could actually be kind of longer or shorter depending on how fast your music is. But eventually 2 bars is done. Your game knows nothing about your music. It doesn't actually know that it's 2 bars long. All it knows is when the file starts and when it ends. Basically, when it starts with the first 1 or 0 and goes all through all the 1s and 0s to the last 1s and 0, and it just at the end of it, it knows, okay, that file is done. So computer says intro 2 is now done. What do I do? And of course, this happens in like a blink of an eye. The computer does this all seamlessly in the background. And the only reason that this whole thing works is because you composed the music that way so that intros would work with main loops. Main loops could loop and kind of switch for as long as they needed to, and then it will transition into an ending. So, okay, intro 2 is done. What do I do now? Then the game looks at the code and says, all right, there should be 3 main loop files there. Randomly choose one and play it. All right, so the computer chooses main loop 3 and plays it. That file is 8 bars long, so it plays all the way through, plays a little bit longer overall. Again, the computer has no idea about your music. All it knows is when the file is over. And it gets to the end of main loop 3 and it says, what do I do now? And the computer looks at the code and says, well, now find another main loop, or play the same one over again, randomly choose another one and play it. So as the game plays, this is what's happening to your music in the background. It'll randomly choose main loop 3, then it'll choose main loop 1, then it'll choose main loop 2, then it'll go back to main loop 1, then it'll play main loop 3 4 times in a row, then it'll go back to 2, then it'll go, and it'll just randomly play them for as long as you are playing. It can repeat. That's why they're loops. That's why they're meant to be able to play back seamlessly. Certainly a loop means when you reach the end of a file, it can return back to the top as invisibly and as seamlessly as possible. And it will do that for as long as it needs to. Your music, basically there is a 3... Each time you end a main loop, there is a 3-pronged fork in the road. So I play through main loop 2, and then I can jump to one of 3 places. I could jump back to the top of main loop 2, I could jump to the top of main loop 1, or I could jump to the top of main loop 3, and then play whatever the rest of that file is. That actually says you are probably better served to start on the same chord of main loop 1, 2, or 3. Like always resolve back to the tonic. So you can navigate through your chord progression wherever you want to go, but you always know it's going to return back to a tonic wherever you jump, main loop 1, 2, or 3. That can often help. That also means that main loop 1, 2, and 3 need to be in the same key. They need to be in the same tempo and time signature. They basically need to all feel like the same song. It's just, and the same instruments playing that song. It's just 3 different variations on an idea. If they were completely different, like if they had completely different instrumentation, they were in different keys, they were in different tempos and time signature, as you jumped around every 8 bars, it would be a completely different song, and it would be obvious when they repeated themselves. So you want a little bit of variation. Your tempo and key doesn't change, your instrumentation doesn't change, so where the most change and variation comes from is your composition. So the notes that you play, that's where the variation comes in. So the drums might change the pattern a little bit, maybe the hi-hat changes up a bit. The bass line changes, plays a different line. The chord progression might substitute a couple different chords or be a different progression entirely. And the melody is going to provide you the most change, the most development. It is your theme, it is the voice of your music, and will constantly, hopefully, will constantly vary and progress forward. And if you have a constantly developing theme, then your music seems less repetitive, and your listener just kind of gets lost more so overall. So that is intros, that is main loops. So now we got to figure out the endings. As long as the game is being played, you hear the main loops until something happens, and that is until you run out of health. The game knows when the game is over, like when the ending is supposed to play, when you run out of health. You may notice it here, but the bean has a health meter at the top. And this will eventually run low, and your player will lose a life. And at that time, the game is okay, right about here. So, the game plays the intro, then it plays a main loop, and it constantly just chooses another random main loop to play. And during the entire gameplay, there's another question that the computer is constantly asking, and that is, have I run out of health yet? And the answer as you're playing is always no, until it's yes, until you did, right? At this moment, the player loses the last sliver of health, and so the game says, okay, what do I do now with the music? And computer looks at the code, or the game looks at the code and says, all right, there should be 3 ending cues. Randomly choose one. We are going to stop the main loop wherever you were, whichever main loop you were playing, whatever was going on, we're going to stop that one currently. Then we are going to immediately transition over to one of these random ending cues. So it'll just hard cut from one to the next, but that works because you just died, you just lost control in the game. It's going to restart over again. And then it starts the whole process back over. Randomly chooses an intro cue, then plays that for 2 bars, randomly chooses a main loop cue, plays that for 8 bars, then randomly chooses another one, and keeps doing that until you run out of all of your health. It immediately cuts off the main loop and plays the ending cue. The ending cues should end in silence. They will end they will end in silence so that it produces basically the period at the end of the sentence. The music resolves seamless or strongly down to the ending, resolves to silence. Music is over, and the whole game starts all over again. So I want to load up a few examples, a few things for us to take a listen to. We got logic loading up here. Hold on just a sec. All right, let me see if we can actually hear this. Hold on. All right. I think that should work. Let's start with our first one here. Whenever logic decides to wake up, it's thinking very hard about something. There we go. All right. So here I have a couple of different student examples. Let me widen this out a little bit. All right, so each student has their own track, and there are 9 files. There are 3 8-bar loops, there are 3 2-bar intros, and 3 2-bar endings. And we're going to take a listen to a couple of these. We'll probably jump around a little bit. But it should give us a couple of good things to discuss. So let me start up the first one here. Just give me a heads up in the chat that that is working, that you can hear that, and you still hear me, and everything's working. Turn it up there. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so these are our main loops, 8 bars long, with a little bit of change. So here we go to the next main loop. We got the drums, we got a tuba and other brass. Tuba is the bass, brass as the harmony, and the marimba playing the lead line. What happened to my loop? All right, main loops. They, number one, are supposed to loop. 8 bars long. They notice that they seamlessly transition from one to the next. So they can play for as long as they need to. And just kind of progress as seamlessly as possible. They need to be the same instrumentation, playing in the same key, in the same tempo, but with variations to the composition. So these main loops start with 3 intros. So here are 3 intro files. Oops, not 3 intro files. Hold on. Here are 3 intro files. So intros are supposed to build up. They're supposed to rise in energy. They are the end of your intro needs to fit seamlessly with the beginning of your main loop. So wherever you're starting out in these main loops, at the first bar or so, you need to have the same instrumentation and the same intensity so that it transitions seamlessly. Play. Please play. There it goes. Nope. So often you're subdividing the rhythm works very well to bring up that energy. Something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bop, 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 da, bop, 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 da, ba, da, ba, da, ba, da. I mean, that's a very straightforward example, but that sort of a rhythm, typically the intros rise. Everything moves in an upward direction. All of the instrumentation kind of builds up heading into the main loops. Then we have 3 endings, and most importantly, endings need to end. These are actually not a very good example of those because they do get cut off at the end. These 3 down here make a little bit more sense because the music will hit that last note or chord, and then everything will fade eventually to silence. So let's take a listen to these 3 endings first. So they should provide a strong period to the end of the sentence, strong resolution. All of the instrumentation of the main loops should also be present in the endings. Let's take a listen to another one down here. Does anybody have any questions about this composition? About how you might approach this? Let's do the next one here. Next change here. So let's do 3 intros that would head into that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 3 endings. These endings do actually end in silence. So if you need a little bit of extra time in the ending cues where your music needs to end in 2 bars, but if you need a little bit extra room to to allow for reverb tails, cymbal crashes, instrument decay, that can certainly work there. So those are more kind of in the analog instrument domain, the acoustic instrument, I guess I should say, not analog. Let's play a couple that are more kind of synthy overall. This is what I would probably describe as kind of classic video game, maybe Sega Genesis type of music right here. There we go. So, good changes, strong lead line. So everything smoothly progresses from one to the next. Here are 3 intros. So here's, I don't think I did this earlier, but here's basically what would happen. Here is intro 3. That will play into main loop 1. See if I can line those up. All right, so it'll play through those 2 bars and immediately drop in. Let's do intro. Let's do intro 1 into main loop 3. So you have to watch out for level discrepancies like that. But overall, the intros build nicely into the main loops. And here are 3 endings. So you can have a lot of fun with the endings. You can get away with a lot more dissonance in the endings because maybe like one last dissonant chord because you just died, you just kind of messed up in the game. I've heard things where the entire band kind of crumbles apart, whether the notes and the rhythms fall apart or whether it actually like it adds in some effect. I've heard where it hits the last note and it bounces out and there's a whole bunch of reverb. There's a lot of different things that you can play with this approach. What else? Let's do, I think it's this one. Another kind of synth one here. And that's an intro. Hold on. All right, this one has a strong lead line and kind of fast drums. And 3 intros. These have that strong feel of subdividing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kind of builds up, and then 3 endings here. These get really close to getting cut off, but they do actually end very suddenly at the end here. Oh my goodness, stop playing. Okay. What else do I have? I think that should give you a pretty solid overview of this assignment. Couple more things down here. It says, suggestions for composition. Compose interesting loops. Make sure you only have 8 bars in any one of these phrases. There's a good chance that your music might... Whoa, just dropped my headphones. There's a good chance that your music might be repetitive enough on its own with these 8 bars. Do not make it even more repetitive by putting a... sometimes what I hear is a 4-bar loop twice in 8 bars, or a 2-bar loop 4 times in 8 bars, or even worse, a 1-bar loop 8 times. I think I did my math wrong. Anyway, 1 bar 8 times over and over and over again. It's going to get very, very repetitive. Here in the chat, with the exception of the first examples, these all seem overly complex and dense for such a simple animation. Is that okay? Well, I kind of go towards these for their musicianship aspect. They have a lot going on that allows for a lot of that variation. You want to stay away from the repetition. But your son said they sound like game music. Excellent. Yeah, it's really up to you as to how dense you want. I typically warn against the, and what I can commonly get is 1 drum kit, a bass line, something that just hits a chord every once in a while, and a melody that holds whole notes or just changes on the chord change. So these certainly lean towards the having more layers and density going on in the mix overall, but certainly open to a wide variety of stuff. Transitions. Make sure everything loops and transitions fluidly so that they're 8-bar phrases. Sometimes I'll get like a 12-bar phrase that just cuts off in 8 bars and doesn't really feel like it's finishing the idea. Make sure there's no pops or clicks or gaps or anything as it transitions from one to the next. Keep the same tempo. I said that if it changes tempo or key too much, it'll sound like a wonderful mess as it's playing back. Continuous loops, that's actually the gaps and fades and pops and clicks. You want nothing in the music to really identify to the player that the music has started over again. Watch out for attack of your instruments. Things like strings and things that take a little while to fade in can sound like everything just cuts off and it starts all over again. The overall mix you do have control over because you are doing both your music and sound effects. Eventually, you're going to want to listen to your music and sound effects together inside of Logic as you're making determinations of how loud any of your sound effects are going to be or any of your music. All right, then the rest of this talks about how to deliver everything and post it up on FSO. That should be everything I want to discuss there. And what else? Let me go back to my slides, which is this somewhere. Where did I go with that? Did I just close that? Oh, no, that's it. Okay. Bring that back up. Do this. Okay. This is your second game of the month. This will just kind of give you a preview of what we have coming forward. This is a game called Angry Bots. And it is what's often called a third-person shooter, where you are a mercenary that's trying to infiltrate a robot factory, and the robots are certainly not too happy that you are there, and they are bent on your destruction, and you have to defend yourself from this robot onslaught. This obviously has a different vibe, a different style of music that's needed for it. This one is not family friendly. It would be much more kind of a more adult oriented or teenager oriented kind of game. More dark and intense. The music should be much more epic and strong and powerful. You've got all these robots that are chasing you around with explosions there, and there's lasers and machine guns and all sorts of things. So lots of action happening, lots of intensity, and the music will match all of that. So different approach for the music also, how the music will play back in the game and how it will transition. The challenge here is that you are going to be attacked by all these robots, and so you're going to hear action music, and then once the robots are gone, after a certain period of time, it will return back to ambient music. And we are going to shift very quickly back and forth between ambient and action. How do you create music for a game when you don't know when any of these robots are going to attack? They're just going to basically sit there until the player shows up and gets in their area. So we'll talk about how the music will react for a game like this. I think that's everything that I needed to discuss. We'll hang around for a few minutes afterwards to answer any questions. Here in the chat, when opening up the looping logic session file, you get a message stating that the project needs to be updated to the current version. After updating, I noticed not all of the audio files from the original session are in the new session. Missing files are any of those files the ones that are actually used in the session? And if they are, which they probably should be, then when you did the save as, make sure that you check audio files. Like if I do this, and I do a file, save as, then if they're not, were they only located in the bin? Like you checked audio files is here. Are they actually missing from the session? Those might have been extra files that are just sitting in the bin and maybe are not actually in the session. And if that's the case, then I can just send you an update, like a Logic 10 version of the session. Just write me a message if you're still having issues with it. Or like give me a send me a message and give me a screenshot of the like which files are missing in the actual I checked the bin in the original file. Okay, so they could have just been sitting in the bin of the original file and not needed in the updated version. So look in the updated version and make sure that there's no blank regions or anything like that. And if there are no blank regions actually on tracks, because you don't need to pull anything from the bin, everything's actually on the tracks that you're working with. So if your tracks have all the audio, then you're fine, and those were just unnecessary files that were in the original session. So, yeah. If you have continuing issues with that, then send me screenshots and I can better identify what is needed. Cool. All right. Well, if we have any further questions, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the archive here, and we will meet again on Friday. All right. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.